No, visual novels are all good. They can be classed as games, and some of my favorite games are visual novels like Coffee Talk or VA11 Hall A, otherwise known as Valhalla, a cyberpunk adventure. Check both of these out, by the way. They are just charming little adventures. But what do I mean when I say video games aren't books? Well, to put it very simply, video games are not supposed to be consumed like books. Books are passive entertainment mediums, whereas video games are this. Blame someone. And when we know this is what video games are, why the hell are some developers so intent on shoving entries upon lore entries that completely break this flow? Video games are not supposed to be read, they are supposed to be experienced. And we really need to get past this cop-out of putting a bajillion lore entries rather than using the advantage of the video game medium to tell stories and build worlds. Listen, I am not saying that video games cannot have text, cannot have lore entries, or cannot have additional exposition to build out their worlds. But why are we treating a medium as dynamic as video games like a medium as static as books? See, for example here, I'm playing Cyberpunk 2077. I'm infiltrating an enemy base. My heart is racing and I have like 10 enemies in front of me that I need to take out. I am planning my tactics, preparing my approach, asking if I should go in with stealth or should I just say screw it and go guns blazing, and just picked up a lore entry. Let's stop everything and read the latest entry in the diaries. First of all, why the hell is this even a collectible lore entry? I mean, the only way this is fleshing out the world is telling us how someone used their flesh for some unga boonga, you know? And second of all, okay, let's give it to the developers and say that somehow showing how a Lady of the Night experiences Night City does flesh out how ruthless the city is. Why did I stumble upon it when I'm trying to gun down 10 enemies? Shoehorning lore entries like this completely undermines the work of the game designers and puts the players into a lose-lose situation. Think of the outcomes that can occur when I put a lore entry during a level. Either I break my immersion and flow state to read a stupid lore entry, one that 8 times out of 10 will just be some fluff and will not fulfill me narratively, or I skip the lore entry and have a significant chance of having no idea what I'm doing or where I am at, because the developers did not treat video games as video games and expect players to read rather than experience the story. Books are fundamentally different experiences to video games, where books immerse you through the power of your imagination, while just reading, video game immersion is something radically different. Video games immerse you through mechanical immersion by the gameplay and getting you into that flow state, or they immerse you through the narrative by cutscenes, voice dialogues, environment design, or story-based missions. But both of these are completely incompatible with lore entries that force you to stop everything, sit down, and read like a book. By the way, if you want more information on video game immersion, check out this video where I talk about if realism is even important in video games or not. But to illustrate this idea again, look at the gameplay on screen. I'm playing Doom Eternal and I have been completely sucked in by slaying demons left and right, using the wide array of weapons and tools in my arsenal to beat different types of demons and trying my best to maintain my flow state, which is to keep the killing machine that is the Doomslayer revving. But now look, I got a lore entry. This is the lose-lose situation I talked about earlier, because if I don't read the entry, I have zero idea of where I am at or the story of the place. This is because the story of Doom Eternal is virtually non-existent, as the developers took the shortcut of hiding it behind these lore entries. On the other hand, if I do want to find out about the story or about where I'm at, I'll have to completely break my flow state, pause, de-immerse myself, and go read the boring 10-page entry. See? Lose, lose? Well, aside from our favorite lore tubers who make bank from making lore videos on our favorite games. Love you, Vatividya. No, seriously, I mean it. Watch his videos. Imagine his videos as cutscenes while playing Souls games. Wouldn't that be better than missing half the story because you didn't pick up the items in order or didn't read them fully? Well, this is the problem. This is what we don't want. We understand that video games have different tools to tell stories and they shouldn't be read like books. But what can we even do about it? Before getting into the solution to this problem, I would be eternally grateful if you could leave a like on this video if you enjoyed and subscribe to the channel if you want to watch more deep dives into gaming like this one. Well, fortunately, we have a bunch of ways many creative developers tune lore entries and exposition to use the strengths of the video game medium. The first way is so simple you won't believe it. Voice the lore entries. Yes, it is literally that simple. Voicing the goddamn lore entries allows players to keep playing the game while listening to the lore of the place or what's going on. It is literally like listening to your favorite podcast while playing games. Instead of like listening to an episode of Good Mythical Morning. You can listen to this lovely gentleman talk about
the value of human life. There is no value to human life.
The best example of this is Bioshock. The developers spread lore entries throughout the levels, but rather than them being 10-page novellas, they are voice diaries of pivotal characters of the story that you can listen to as you play. When I pick up these entries, I am not pulled out of the game entirely. It is so simple that I don't know how this didn't become the standard of all video games going forward. I mean, voice talent isn't even that expensive and this helps players and player immersion so much. I'm just so tired of stupid lore entries that I have to pause my game to read. Otherwise, I have less of an idea about the world I'm in. Anyway, I know I did say that this is the simplest solution to fixing the quote-unquote book problem, but there does need to be some fine-tuning to make it work. If you have audio diaries across the level, for the love of all that is holy, make the entries relevant to the mission, level, or environment. Do not have the latest edition of the diaries if you are not in a brothel or the lady of the night is not relevant to the story. This weird habit of developers putting lore entries that are completely out of left field and unrelated to the play zone has no fix. Developers, take a breather. I know you have 10,000 words you want to say about your world, but only put in entries that make sense. There is also a difference of opinion for voiced lore entries. I am very firm on my point that when you introduce voiced lore entries or diaries into the game, you need to allow players to listen to them while they play the game. However, some games like Mass Effect do it a bit differently, where the entries are voiced but they cannot be played while you do something else. Now, some people are okay with this because they go and listen to them like an audiobook.
Literally spent an hour or two of Mass Effect going through the entire database and just reading the whole lore of Mass Effect.
I'd rather not. I'd rather not, you know.
But I believe this is a niche use case. Like I said, you turn on your favorite video game to play it, not to use it like an audiobook to sit there and listen. There are other creative ways to integrate lore books or additional text into the game aside from just voicing the entries too. That is to integrate them into the gameplay or the worlds so that you do not have to go into different menus to access them and they are placed in narratively correct places across the map. The pièce de résistance for such a way is none other than Outer Wilds. In Outer Wilds, the primary gameplay loop is literally reading lore entries. And you know what? It is fun as hell because of how the developers planned it. This is why I keep repeating, I am not against text or lore entries in games. I am against developers treating video games as if they were books to be read, not games to be played. In Outer Wilds, the primary purpose of the player is to explore the solar system and discover texts left behind by an ancient alien civilization. Through reading these texts, you get to learn about what happened to the alien race, how they disappeared, and more fundamentally, how to solve the different puzzles of the various planets in the solar system. It's like discovering ancient hieroglyphs and deciphering what happened to the ancient Egyptian civilization and their pyramids. And the best part is, the quote-unquote lore entries are basically character dialogue connected to the place they are situated in. So not only are they short and sweet because they're placed on walls which have limited space, the texts themselves tell the stories through dialogue. It's not some nebulous lore dump, it's dialogue of the ancient Nomai race, and you start to feel connected to the characters as you discover more texts. So why can't other games do this? Or in fact, why can't they improve upon it by adding voice acting or pseudo cutscenes? They don't even have to copy Outer Wilds, they just need to take 3 important lessons from it. First, the lore entries should be accessible through the gameplay and not having to go into the menus. If you're telling a story, it should be at the forefront, not buried in the back end. Second, they need to be short and concise to respect the player's time and really draw them in, versus having them read hundreds of pages of useless text that players will inevitably ignore. And last but not least, the entries need to be about characters that span across different texts so that you can build a relationship with such characters. Remember, the more you show rather than tell, the more immersed players will be. They should not be experiencing exposition dumps that are just impersonal and frankly boring as all hell that go on to break the immersion. Just imagine this. You are exploring an abandoned hospital. Now imagine that you come across some digital entries across the walls of the hospitals as you explore. Or, like I said, better yet, voiced holograms like here in Titanfall 2, which are essentially in-game pseudo cutscenes. And these entries talk about how the hospital collapsed through the spread of an incurable virus which led to the staff quickly abandoning it. And the whole thing is told through the perspective of a doctor and other recurring characters that keep making appearances in the entries. This makes the story engaging, personal, and uses the power of video games, that of visual and audio cues, to their full potential. Wouldn't you want to experience such a story as you explore? Wouldn't it make exploration that much more? Or would you rather have hundreds of pages of impersonal lore dumps about how the hospital was abandoned? Do you see how you can integrate lore into video games while taking advantage of the medium and not treating it like a book? If you are a developer watching this, I beg of you, stop the shoehorning of books into games thinking it's enough rather than telling an actual story and ignoring the strengths of video games. I am tired of reading boring crap in my games. I'm tired of wanting some semblance of a story, then going to the lower pages just to be either more confused or burned with a useless long ass entry that doesn't even fulfill me. And I get it. Sometimes you can't help but have your story be text-based or have lore entries. How about then voicing them? And if you can't even do that, then at least be pithy enough to respect the player's time. Not all games can have the lusty Argonian maid and make it work, because not all games are Skyrim trying to show that you can quote-unquote read in the game.
Nice.
Oh, and whatever you do, don't do this.
I don't even have time to explain why I don't have time to explain.
This was just infuriating. Imagine not even having the ability to read the lore in-game, instead needing a whole ass website to find out what's going on in the story in Destiny because the campaign was so crap. Bungie is much better now, but they still have stupid Grimoire card entries in the game that you need to read through to get to the deep lore of the game. Goddamn, if My Name is Biff didn't exist, I am pretty sure most of the player base would gloss right over the lore of Destiny.